Welcome back. This is part 3 of the Western Conference previews. We have I have rotated my Zoom background, and Dave is going to be drinking a beer during this part to show the passage of time from afternoon into night in the recording of this. We are now coming to the Houston Rockets, and we don't have as comprehensive a season preview for them as other teams, because there is a pretty obvious elephant in the room, which is that James Harden has publicly asked for a trade. He originally said he only wanted to go to the Brooklyn Nets. He has now extended that list to, I think, include the Bucks, the Heat, the 76ers, and just like other general contending teams.
Mainly in the East as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Eastern Conference contenders, which is interesting. I actually hadn't even put that together. But yeah, so there's a real possibility, if not a likelihood, that their best player is not on the team by the time the season starts. Like, this seems to be a situation that's changing pretty rapidly. I actually kind of think if the James Harden trade stories happened in reverse, like if he put this list out first and then it came out later that his preferred destination was Brooklyn, I kind of think he already would have moved. Because I feel like you could talk a team into trading for him and saying, yeah, I think we can get him to re-sign if he hadn't said, I need to go to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But now that he said that, it feels like everyone's kind of standoffish and being like, no, actually, we don't want to mortgage our future for what's probably going to be a year of James Harden.
Yeah, it lowers his the trade package a little bit, and I think you're already seeing that with some of these reports coming out about Sixers seem very hesitant about Simmons. Thought it was very funny the Heat gave a flat out no apparently about Tyler Hero, which is, I mean, I love Tyler, but I do think
you're a Heat fan. Was that ridiculous of them to do, or what do you think?
So I get it in the sense of like, all right, Tyler is not sure exactly, but I think 11 years younger than James Harden.
Yeah.
Making about $30 million less. And
important part, yeah.
Because of the way rookie contracts work and the rookie extensions work, you kind of have Tyler locked up for the next 7 years.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Yeah.
So you have 7 years of Tyler Hero versus, I think, a year and a half of James Harden. I'm trying to remember when his contract ends.
Yeah, I think he's got 2 seasons left, but depending on when the trade happens, it could be a year and a half, could be 2. You don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it for the Heat. At the same time, you could make an argument though that if you are able to pull off a trade, if you're Miami, you pull off a trade of Hero, some picks, maybe Kendrick Nunn, Kelly Olynyk,
Duncan.
I mean, I don't really see. I hesitate going that far. Let's say you don't.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I like these guys too much. I'm too biased.
Understandable, though.
So maybe yeah. I mean, I just saw these guys help us.
This is the thing you have to consider if you're a team. Like,
I just saw these guys help us get to a finals. So like,
yeah, like ultimately you do have fans who are sitting there saying, okay, like we really like these players. They got us to an NBA Finals. We took 2 games off the Lakers. Like, why don't we just run it back?
Yeah.
And like, especially when the guy that you're bringing in is like at times kind of hard to root for.
Yeah.
And like he's fantastic. He's probably the best scorer in the NBA right now. But also, like, his style of play isn't that much fun to watch. You might cause some waves with fans. Like, there's no way to trade for James Harden that isn't franchise altering, I feel like. Like, regardless of how little you have to give up, you kind of have your basketball is going to look different once you trade for him.
Yeah. And I think as far as these packages go, based on what I'm hearing, I mean, the only thing we've heard from the Miami side of it is that they won't give up Hero. And I am sure there is the implied, no, we're not giving up Bam either. Because I'm sure whenever, the Rockets went to the Heat, because they have talked apparently, it was a very quick, like, so it was Bam an option and a very quick no, I'm sure.
Can we have Bam? No. Can we have Tyler? Also no.
You can have Kendrick Nunn and Kelly Olynyk.
And the 23rd pick in 3 straight drafts. Sorry, 2 out of 3 drafts. But yeah, no, I think it's the hard stuff. I feel like going to kind of linger at this point because like none of the obvious destinations, like the teams that he's listed that he would be willing to go to, either no longer have the capital get it done. Like the Bucks kind of blew their load on Drew Holiday, and then the Heat don't really want to. So it's got like you're in this weird middle ground of like either we can't or we are saying no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's going to be a Rocket for a while.
Yeah, and I think that I just another point on the trade thing. I think this like Nets package has got kind of overrated in the way we've been talking about it.
This what?
Is this the Nets package? Like,
yeah.
Is Dinwiddie, Allen, and LeVert? They're good.
Yeah.
Are any of those guys going to be all-stars? Can you confidently say yes?
I mean, confidently, given what the West looks like, not really. But I also think like at a certain point, if it becomes apparent that like you're not getting Tyler Harrow, you're not getting Bam, you're not getting Ben Simmons, you're not getting, I don't know, like would Milwaukee's package include Chris Middleton? Like
It
if
would
you're not
have
getting
to.
like it's a weird position to be in where you're trading the best scorer in the league and you're also sitting there being like, well, a better deal hasn't presented itself. Mm-hmm. Like it's a very odd rock and hard place to be in between.
Which is why it makes more and more sense over time that the best trade idea is Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
And I see it working out. I know that's tough for Sixers fans. I would also, if I was a Sixers fan, probably feel really sad about trading away Ben.
Yeah, because he's kind of like Embiid's obviously like the crown jewel of the process, but Simmons is like Embiid's the only player more synonymous with this era of the Sixers than Simmons, and so I feel like it would hurt. Like again, going back to that sort of franchise altering thing, like you'd have a lot of fans that were sad about that because they've come to root for this version of the team.
Yeah.
But speaking of versions of the team, to bring it back to the Rockets, for the purposes of these projections, do you want to assume that Harden stays just to make things simpler? Okay. So if Harden stays, I actually think they have a pretty good roster. I mean, that seems like a little bit of an understatement because obviously they have Harden, which makes a lot of things easier. But like if Harden stays, you're looking at probably a starting 5 of like John Wall, James Harden, maybe a Ben McLemore, Christian Wood, and PJ Tucker. That's a good roster.
Yeah.
Like Christian Wood looked really good at the end of last season.
Yeah. There's a lot of flexibility here too, because you got Gordon too, like David Nwaba, you got
Daniel
House. I mean, Chris Clemens played a bit for them last year. There's a good amount of there's. I mean, it really isn't that different than the team of last year, except it's Wall instead of Westbrook.
They seem to have kind of backed off this weird like tiny ball thing a little bit. Like they have Boogie on their roster now. They brought in Christian Wood, obviously. Like if they need to bring a big person onto the court, they can, which I feel like almost is kind of that adjustment to the Lakers that every team is making now, where it's like, okay, no, we need someone like that, just big body to throw at Marc Gasol. But I mean, at the end of the day, still pretty good. Like it's not a perfect roster.
No. I think it runs into the same problems it has the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's really a worse version of last year's roster.
Yeah, like
the only upgrade you could say is Wood if he stays as good as he is.
Yeah, like I'm assuming John Wall is going to be a similar role to Russ. So like I don't think that's a colossal upgrade. I love John Wall. He's like Russ probably still has the edge right now, especially with Wall coming back from the injuries. But no, I think you're correct. Like they're going to run into a lot of the same problems. They're going to be thin up front. They are going to be relying on a lot of role players to make a lot of shots. Well, they'll be relying on James Harden to make a lot of shots, but like at some point, those guys are going to have to step up, and you wonder how ready they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's despite the new GM, new coach,
Steven Silas, baby.
I think I have a tough time believing that if Harden stays, it won't just be more Harden ball.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to get the same kind of 5-out offenses with lots of dribbling.
Oh, yeah.
And then last, couple seconds, we're going to get you get a little ISO and maybe a kick out or a foul.
Yeah. Some nice free throws.
There's only so many options with this style of play.
Like the good thing is, even if it's a worse version of last year's roster, like they're kind of built to sustain their production with worse, like complementing players, because ultimately it's still like we're gonna go as far as Harden takes us, and for the time being, they still have Harden. So like in that sense, they're kind of built to weather the storm until Harden leaves. But what do you think? Like, where do you think this team falls in the West if Harden is on the roster? Because they were what, like a 3 seed? No, they were not the 3 seed last year. They were like a 4 seed last year.
Yeah,
4 or 5.
I think they got a. I think they got to fall back a little. I would.
Yeah.
If Harden stays in the team, I think they make the playoffs.
Yep.
But I think they are in maybe that 6 to 8 spot.
Yeah, I feel like that's about where I'd put them. Like, they're down a bit, and I feel like a lot of the teams behind them are up this year. So, like, I don't know. I could see them finishing behind, like, a Utah or behind even Dallas, because Dallas, everything is looking up. So, yeah, probably like a 5 seed or a play-in team.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good way to say it. I can't say I have a ton of faith in Boogie being much of anything.
It's sad.
Like it's just
horrible injury luck.
Yeah, I mean we've seen him in the last year and a half. What has he been? He's been injured, and when he's played, he looks slow and not able to really keep up on defense.
Yeah.
And it's sad. Yeah, he was like so incredibly dominant for
a
long
that one
time.
year he played with the Pelicans was insane.
That was
like before he got hurt, he was at like 26, 12, and 5 a game.
Yeah, it was absurd. I mean,
yeah,
and yeah, I think the biggest problem with this team is that it seems like you're really betting on 2 guys with awful injury history of the last year and a half.
Yes. Not the best spot to be in, but the Rockets kind of don't have many other options.
Yeah, because if Wall isn't the guy, Cousins isn't the guy, then you're looking at like a James Harden and accessories team.
Yeah. Well, like Wall, the tough thing is so much of his game is built off of that explosiveness that like coming back from the long injury that he's had, you would hope he can get back, but it's not a guarantee.
No.
So like that's a question mark. Speaking of question marks, how many years away are we from Bruno Caboclo being ready for the NBA? Because when he was drafted, Fran Fraschilla said we were 2 years away from being 2 years away. Do you know where we're at with that?
So also it was like the takes were the Brazilian Kevin Durant.
Well,
that he was 2 years away from 2 years away from being 2 years away of that.
Okay.
That ceiling, I think, right?
Huh.
Or at least like the start of that. I believe it was.
Have you seen this?
I believe it was last year.
Last year was the Brazilian Kevin Durant year.
It should have been the first year of it. Last year, Bruno played 30 games between the Grizzlies and the Rockets, and he averaged 3 points, 2 rebounds, and about a half of an assist.
Okay, but what were the shooting numbers? He might be shooting like Durant and just not shooting a lot.
So this is a bizarre shooting line.
Oh God.
42.7, 18.2,
Oh no.
but then 89.
There's hope. He's got a good shot. If the free throws are falling, I feel like we can work with this.
um, so yeah, I mean, I forgot he was on this team. It's I was looking at
You can say that about a lot of these players.
yeah, I was looking at Christian Wood's game the other day, and
Yeah.
he was like for 20 games, I think it was. He was a 22 and 10 guy with like three
Jeez.
assists and almost like a block and a steal on good efficiency.
That could
All
be
during
insanely helpful for this team.
yeah, during the games that Blake was injured.
Damn.
If he is anything like that, I mean, I do think he's a kind of X factor here. There's a good
Yeah.
there's a good chance. Actually, I'm gonna bet on it that
Oh
he
boy.
is their second leading scorer after Harden.
I actually don't hate that. I don't hate that at all.
It's either him or
Um,
Gordon, probably.
yeah, most likely.
I think
So then
Wall is going to be like. I really don't think any.
Wall's going to be shooting less than we think he is.
Yeah, people shouldn't be expecting some 20 and 10 return to form to Wall. I feel like it's going to be more
No,
like a 15 and 8 kind of thing.
he's just not going to have the ball enough to do 20 and 10.
No.
Like they're not changing the model for Wall currently. As long
No.
as Harden's here, it's Harden ball.
But
Um,
what'll be interesting is I think we're going to see some games where Harden's on the bench and they make up for those minutes by having just Wall in there and they play
Wall ball.
really fast
Mm.
and they get a lot of threes up and everyone is going to be like, oh, they look better when it's just Wall and the shooters out there.
Oh, you know what? I actually could see that narrative coming in. Just like everyone being like, I enjoy watching them more when it's just Wall and everyone else. And
Yeah.
then that slowly becoming like, are the Rockets better without Harden?
Mm.
I'm excited for that take cycle. Now, moving on to another team, we've only got three left. It's the top three in the West, I think. Um, it's the Denver Nuggets we're going to go with first. Nuggets made a surprise conference finals run last year. It was down 3-1 to the Jazz and then 3-1 to the Clippers. And like losing by, I think, 16 in the third quarter of that game 5 against the Clippers. And
Mm-hmm.
came back. Like they won that game. They won the game after it. The one after that. And then they went and played the Lakers.
And they were also like down
Yeah.
double digits in all three of those games.
Yes. Very impressive. And obviously they took one game off the Lakers and then were bounced. But still, like, beat the Clippers in a 7-game series, which no one thought they could do. No one thought anyone could do, except the Lakers, maybe. Let's see. They lost Jeremy Grant. That's the elephant in the room. A guy who can kind of rim protect for them, space the floor a bit, like just a very useful skill set.
Like
They
a
replaced him.
Swiss Army knife kind of guy.
Perfect analogy. They replaced him with Jermichael Green, who I think is a good, like, about as good a replacement as you're gonna find. He doesn't have the length that Grant has. He's probably not as much of a rim protector, but like offensively, he can do what Jeremy Grant does.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add here. I think it's pretty funny that Jermichael Green was on that Clippers team that blew the 3-1 lead and then was like, I'm gonna go to the Nuggets.
Yeah, he if you can't beat him, join him to an NBA team. So where do you think the question marks are for Denver this year?
They're I want to say their depth is a little questionable, but it's really only because you lose Grant. So it's just like one less guy
Yeah.
that you trust a lot. When I'm looking at their starting lineup, some good things I see is that, and all of that, those 3-1 upsets, that conference finals, no Will
Yeah.
Barton. They didn't have,
Yeah.
he was injured.
Yeah.
Gary Harris wasn't there for a while.
Yeah.
So I think there's a world where they're actually, I don't want to say better, but like, you know, can keep up with what they did last year because Will Barton is a really nice offensive player and a
Oh yeah,
surprisingly good defensive player too.
yeah, he's a good two-way piece.
And can, but like unlike a lot of two-way three, like unlike a lot of two-way guys like him, he can also get his own shot. He can create.
Yeah, yeah, he's a
Very
good handler.
valuable, very valuable kind of guy to have out there.
Absolutely.
And when I look at this lineup, I think the biggest question mark has to be Millsap.
Yeah. How much can he still give you at this point? Like he's 35. He's 35 in a year that's coming off a shortened off season that like the Nuggets were playing late enough that they're going to feel that, I think.
Yeah.
So like he hasn't had a lot of time to rest and recuperate. Obviously he looked really good for them in the playoffs last year and like had a nice like steadying presence on the court, I feel like.
I think Millsap's kind of at the point where he might not look very good during the regular season and kind of turn it on in the playoffs. Kind of at like
he knows
that.
when he needs to play.
Yeah, that like Iguodala, Rondo, veteran kind of player who.
Yeah.
He'll show up. He will play really good defense in the playoffs and make a couple big shots.
But he's not busting his ass for like a Tuesday night game against the Kings.
No.
He's a question. I think guard defense is a question. Gary Harris coming back for a full season will help them. I still think like it's not great. I think other teams' backcourts are going to hurt them. I think teams can kind of try and hunt out Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. depending on who's on the court. So that's something to be aware of. Let's talk about Michael Porter Jr. Actually, he in the playoffs last year came out and said that he felt like he should be getting more touches as a 20-year-old rookie. This seemed like, and I don't mean to say like, oh, you're a rookie, you shouldn't be talking. Like I don't care, but it seemed like it was pretty safely Murray and Jokic's team, and they should be getting the majority of the shots. Like,
it's Murray an odd
Jokic pick and roll is unstoppable.
Odd thing to say on a team that is playing really well in the playoffs with what's working.
Yes. Like he didn't. No one was looking around like, well, what do we have to change about the Denver Nuggets? Like everyone was pretty unanimously being like, no, this is working, except for Michael Porter. I think there is a world where like if Porter isn't playing all of his minutes with Jokic and Murray, he probably gets those shots. Like if you start Murray, Harris, Barton, Millsap, Jokic, and Porter's just running your bench units, he probably gets a lot of shots. And that could be good. Defensively, still not great. Like there were a lot of games where teams looked at Michael Porter last year and just saw food. So
yeah, and I would have to look a little closely, but my first instinct on him defensively feels like it's an effort thing. He has the body of a good defender.
Yeah, it's not a Trae Young where teams are like, oh, he's 5'11". Okay, yeah, let's go.
Michael Porter Jr. is long. He's 6'10".
He's a good athlete.
He is a great athlete. He should be a better defender.
Yeah, it's that simple. Also,
he should be able to guard like 3s and 4s, like be able to switch, like. Yeah.
Or at the bare minimum, just not be the guy the other team is hunting down. Now, I do want to say though, with Porter Jr., because obviously he came into the league with like back problems. The Nuggets have this fun trend of like drafting very upsidey guys who have pretty obvious limitations. Like 2 years ago, it was Porter. Last year, it was Bol, who got some playing time at the end of the season and actually looked good. Like they've released practice clips of him running point and sinking shots. Like I would love to see them start playing him in some regular season games. This year it was RJ Hampton and Marcus Howard, who were both like, well, Marcus Howard was a really good college player at Marquette, great scorer of the ball, but he is 5'11", which like seems like a pretty obvious limitation. And RJ Hampton was a really highly touted high school recruit who went to New Zealand and played professionally over there. I guess didn't show as much as they were hoping.
It just tanked his value.
Yeah. But I like this approach of like, hey, we need a third guy for Murray and Jokic to play with, and we can take some swings here because we've got two of our franchise players.
Yeah. I think no matter what, though, this team still has two guys who we have seen are excellent playoff performers.
Absolutely.
And that's hard you can't devalue that.
No.
You have a guy like Monte Morris, who's a good shooter.
Yeah.
Gary Harris, good defender. PJ Dozier was actually sneaky, getting some good minutes last year in the playoffs after really not playing a ton in the regular season, as far as I know. Yeah, he only played 29 games in the regular season, and then was playing a bit in the playoffs, like just getting them spot minutes here and there because I think he's got good size.
He's a guy that they could steal minutes with, basically.
Yeah.
If somebody needs rest.
I mean, they're big. Their backup bigs maybe a little concerning.
I do think they're going to miss Plumlee more than they think.
Yeah, no Plumlee. They have Isaiah Hartenstein, Bol, I guess, but Bol, I was looking at it, doesn't actually play that much center for them.
No, he feels like very wingy.
Yeah.
They might be thin up front, but like in big games, I feel like it just winds up being like 42 minutes of Jokic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if everything goes right, this team's probably like a tough out in the conference finals. Like I legitimately think they can, with the right like leaps from certain players, they can be a really tough out in a conference finals for our Lakers. Like if Jamal Murray just takes another step and becomes like an all NBA level player, that's going to be very hard for LA to handle because LA, as we will talk about in a couple minutes, didn't really improve their guard defense this year.
A Murray step up and a Porter step up, I think, is the key, really.
Yeah, because Jokic at this point, like, is going to be unbelievable. You know that? And, like, this isn't a knock on him. I just think, like, this is the best Jokic we're going to have, probably. And I say that as he is really good. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that he's bad right now. I'm just saying he probably doesn't have as much of a leap to take as Murray or Porter.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jokic had a sort of a rougher year last year shooting from three, and I think he could definitely improve on that. But yeah, besides that, I mean, a couple years ago he shot almost 40% from three, and this year he shot 31. So there's definitely some inconsistencies there he could work on. He's not taking a ton. He's only taking about 4. But yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest spot to improve for him.
And if it goes wrong, I feel like the easy answer is just they're not going to be able to stop a nosebleed. Porter still thinks he should be taking most of the shots, and Millsap has like this year's version of what Al Horford had last year. And then they're very thin up front once that happens. So with that, I mean, that could be a first-round exit realistically.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like I think we forget sometimes I know they didn't, but they were one Mike Conley shot away from a first-round exit.
Yeah, it's that easy. Like, it could have happened.
A ball that rimmed in and out. It was halfway down, and it
was out. It was a heave of a shot, if I remember correctly. But it was there. Like, you got to look. That's how thin the margin is in the West this year. Now we come to the Los Angeles teams. Which LA team would you like to talk about first?
Let's talk Lakers first.
All right, I like it. They won the championship last year. I'm not sure if you saw. They added Marc Gasol. They added Montrezl Harrell. They added Wesley Matthews. JaVale McGee and Dwight are gone. Rondo is gone. Yeah. And I think those are the only 2 they lost. Or the only 3 they lost.
I believe so.
Okay. So I think the question mark for this team is still defense in the backcourt.
Yeah, but you say that, but they could also throw out KCP and Wes Matthews.
Yeah. Like the question mark is a thing they have players who are good at.
Yeah. So it's like you can throw out a lineup of KCP, Wes Matthews, LeBron, Davis, Gasol, or I don't know if you want Schroeder out there too. I mean,
yeah, Schroeder feels like he might actually just be a sixth man who's not playing down the stretch.
Yeah, I don't know if you want him out at the end of games, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at this team and I see a team that was so good and so difficult to beat, and
they got better.
Yeah.
It's scary. Like, I don't know. Like Montrez and Montrez and Schroeder. I'm very used to saying Montrez and Lou Trez and Lou Trez and Schroeder is probably going to be like your bench scoring production. I don't think either of them are out there at the end of the game. Gasol, like Bill Simmons has said Gasol looked done in the bubble last year. I don't know about that. I kind of think he can still give them a lot and be a problem for a lot of teams.
Yeah, I think it's tough to hold. I still try to not hold bubble performances against guys.
Yeah,
the weird
I
situation.
Agree. It's funny.
That's why I'm still not like, down on Kendrick Nunn, because it was a
weird spot.
Yeah.
It is funny looking at this team and trying to poke holes in it though, because and this is another thing we were talking about before we hit record though. Like they've got Anthony Davis, they have LeBron James, probably the two best players in the NBA. And a lot of these questions mean a lot less when you have those two.
Mm-hmm.
Like Anthony Davis is an alien. LeBron James might be the best player ever. They can do things no one else can, and that kind of erases a lot of weaknesses.
Oh yeah. And on top of that, I mean, Tom, let's go through it right now. How many players in the Lakers could randomly get you 20 points one night?
Schroeder could. I think Caruso could. I think Markieff could.
Mm.
Like Wes Matthews, if he has a weird like I hit 6 threes tonight game, could. Yeah. Like Kuz has. Yeah.
Montrez.
They've got a lot of guys that you have to pay attention to.
There are going to be nights where, I mean, especially at the beginning of this season, based off some things we've heard, where LeBron might be, taking a little easy. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't matter because you have, like, two guys off your bench who can combine for 40 points.
Yeah.
So
they have a bench that's making up for things, and they have starters that are making up for things. It's absurd.
Yeah. I mean, was Quinn Cook on the team last year? I forget.
He was, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so he wasn't new. Maybe we'll see some more Talon Horton Tucker minutes.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think like they have a pretty tight 10-man rotation of like Gasol, Montrez, Schroeder, AD, KCP, Caruso, Markieff, Kuzma, Braun. Have I said Matthews yet?
No.
That's your 10-man rotation right there. Like you can run a season with that, and like just kind of I don't know, play different guys fewer minutes depending on the night.
Yeah.
And like obviously you can slot in THT, you can slot in Quinn Cook as you need to.
And I don't think there's a team, as we've gone through all these teams so far, we're at the 29th team. I don't think there's a team that has 10 guys like the Lakers do.
No.
We've said 7, we've said 8 sometimes, but 10.
We've said 8 like a huge plus too.
Yeah. This regular season for the Lakers, I think, is going to be pure, like, they're going to be great. They might not be, just because of like how normal LeBron regular seasons go. Maybe they don't wipe the floor with everyone every night.
Yeah.
But
they're just trying to get to the dance.
They're going to have so much time to experiment with what kinds of lineups work for them, because you could come up with like 4 or 5 different closing lineups that make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So like they're still probably the best team in the league, I think. I don't think there's any two ways about that.
Yeah, I think easy. They're number one. I mean, they have.
Whether or not they become the number one seed, they are the best team.
Yes, definitely.
Now,
so one thing that you had in the planning doc that I'm curious to ask you about is what kind of team does it take to beat them?
It's an interesting question because, like, I don't know if the perfect matchup for them exists. Like, I tried to find it. Is it Luka? Like, you kind of need, like, Portland could be it if they were better at spots that weren't Dame and CJ. Like, we saw them take a game off of them. Miami took 2 off of them. I think that's actually a very interesting matchup. Like, a team that kind of make the case for Miami being the team that is built to beat the Heat or built to beat the Lakers.
I mean, I think it's weird because the Heat took 2 games off the Lakers. They took more games off the Lakers than any team during their whole playoff run. They did that without
twice as many, in fact.
Yeah, they did that without 2 of their best players.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to not think about how that would have gone without those injuries.
Yeah, no, it's true.
But when I go back and look at those games, and this pains me to say a little bit, but I almost want to say it's the teeniest bit fluky. Just because these 2 games that we won were like genuinely some of the most absurd and heroic finals performances ever by Jimmy Butler. Like, those were the games we won when he put the team entirely on his back and got like 35-point triple doubles.
Yeah.
And just
the kind of thing that's very intangible.
Yeah, just took every shot in the fourth quarter.
This is the Jimmy game.
Just kept getting to the line. Like, was trash talking LeBron, like getting in his head. Like, there's like, it was the game where, the game that we won where, infamously, Jimmy yelled at LeBron, "You're in trouble now."
Yeah.
And they ended up winning, and then the game ended with the Lakers like leaving the court without, high-fiving or anything.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And yeah, I think it really comes down to these weird intangible things of like, does a team match up perfectly with the Lakers? No, no one does.
No.
But if you have someone as insane as Jimmy Butler, maybe that's just what you need.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a small part of me. We'll get to like more season predictions next week.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to jinx them, but there's a small part of me that really feels like a Heat Lakers rematch is possible next year.
I don't see why not. Like, based on what we've seen, Heat made the finals last year.
Yeah, and I think coming back with a healthier team it'll be interesting.
Yeah, totally agree. I do think if we're talking about people that are crazy enough to go against the Lakers, sorry,
you're good.
I almost think like in terms of teams that have someone crazy enough to go against the Lakers, the only 2 teams in the West I can think of that have someone that has that mindset are Denver and the Clippers, because Denver has Jamal Murray, who will just try the most outrageous. Portland too, but like, I think like Jamal Murray tried to dunk on AD last year in a playoff game. That's the kind of outlandish shit that like you only try if you're really here for it.
Yeah.
Dame, we've seen him get into modes that are just terrifying. And then the Clippers have Kawhi, who carried a really good Raptors team to a finals, and is like weirdly stoic about it all. So like from a mindset perspective, I think those are the 3.
And the, elephant in the room of Kevin Durant.
Yeah. As he has told us before, he's Kevin Durant.
He is.
And now, speaking of one of those teams that can beat the Lakers, because I feel like we've took the meat off the bone on them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We got the Clippers now. They added Luke Kennard. They lost Montrez. Yeah. The defining thing to talk about with the Los Angeles Clippers, Luke Kennard.
They also added Batum.
Nick Batum, really?
Mm-hmm. And obviously Ibaka.
They added Nick Batum. They added Serge. They brought back Marcus Morris for $64 million. Mm-hmm. Their closing lineup this year probably looks like Ibaka, Morris, Kawhi, Paul George, and Pat Bev. You think that's probably going to be it?
Yeah, I'd say Yeah, I mean the only substitute you could really do there, if you're really, I mean they could do those offensive defense substitutions, where you throw in Kennard or Lou Will for Beverly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say that sounds good.
I mean, it's weird to look at the questions for this team too, because like ultimately what sunk them last year was Kawhi and Paul George shooting very poorly in like a game 6 and a game 7. Like it just for some reason in those two games the shots stopped falling.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the end of it. Like which is weird.
That and also the Denver figured something out with Jokic.
Yeah, that's true.
The Clippers continuously went with that Harrell on Jokic matchup for far too long.
And had a great time with it.
Yeah.
No, yeah, Jokic put him in the spin cycle. I think so. I mean, like it's weird because this team kind of got to exactly where they wanted it to be last year, and then something fell apart with them. I still think they're the second best team in the West right now. Like even having lost to Denver last year, I think they're really good. I think you're gonna wind up having to steal some minutes with like Reggie Jackson or Patrick Patterson, which you don't feel great about, but you got to do. Mm-hmm. I think center is an interesting spot. Bigs in general are an interesting conversation with them after Serge because it's basically Zubats and like, do you want to try Morris at the 5 for some weird small ball stuff? Probably not, but you can. So like after that though, there's not a lot of depth there. I think they could be a buyout team or a buyout like market team. What do you think the weaknesses are on this team?
Honestly, it's tough to find them because they are, despite the hate that they might get, and especially, after, choking in the playoffs, still a really good team. I mean, maybe wing depth too is a little rough. I mean, are we supposed to expect anything from Nick Batum?
Probably not.
They really don't have anyone after George and Kawhi that can come in and like play the 3 besides Batum. Yeah. But again, what are we looking at from him? And
maybe you go to Morris at that point, but
yeah,
that's a very matchup heavy choice.
Yeah, they feel a little bit more top heavy than they did last year.
Yeah.
Whereas last year their big thing was depth. It was like look at how many good players this team has. They took this overachieving Clippers team from the year before, and all they did was add Kawhi and Paul George to it.
Yeah.
But now, it's looking a little different. And I mean, am I crazy to worry about shooting?
No, I don't think you are. Like that's why I think Kennard's going to be important for them.
Yeah.
But after that, no, I don't think you are. Like if one of your 5 is going to be Serge, which it kind of has to be down the stretch, he's not a shooter. Like Kawhi and Paul George obviously can sink him, but then like you want Pat Bev out there for defense, he's not a shooter. If you're running Ivica Zubats out there, not a shooter. Like,
this is
they
why
feel like they have.
I find that trade that they did very peculiar, the Shamet for Kennard one.
Why is that?
Because I just feel like Shamet fits more with this kind of team.
Yeah.
You know, Shamet was very much a, you know, he's a JJ Redick, Duncan Robinson type of shooter, where he's just constantly running off the screens, trying to get open. Whereas Kennard is a little bit more of a playmaker than that, puts the ball on the floor a lot more. And I just don't know why you needed another guy like that. And why they didn't, you know, we talked about these good pickups with the Suns, but like, why not? Like, I imagining the Clippers with an Etuan Moore and Langston Galloway in those like 9-10 spots.
Yeah, like guys who probably wouldn't have been the hardest to at least make a run at.
No, I mean, I think both of them ended up getting, you know, mid-level exceptions or minimums. So
yeah. And yet, again, when we have this conversation, it's a similar spot to what we talk about with the Lakers. Like, it almost starts to mean less because, like, when you get into clutch possessions in a playoff game and it's that very half-court heavy style of basketball, like, you have Kawhi Leonard, who probably better than anyone in the league, except for maybe LeBron, maybe Kevin Durant, can get to whatever spot he wants on the floor and get a shot from there.
Yeah.
And, like, that's last year they lost because they weren't falling. This year you hope they do.
Yeah.
So I think as we round up this Western Conference talk, I think it's still the Lakers conference. I think the Clippers are going to be back this year. And then there's a lot of teams in the running.
Yeah. Just for final thoughts on the Clippers, what are you making of Paul George and the extension that they just gave him?
They had to, right? I mean, they traded, I forget the exact number, but it was like 6 or 7 first-round picks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like 7 first-round picks. Like, you can't let him walk in free agency. The first thing everyone said when they made that trade was, hey, these picks might actually be good when, like, if Kawhi or Paul George walks in 2 years. So, like, they couldn't let that happen.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense, even if from what we've seen, relying on Paul George in the playoffs might not seem like it makes sense. It's a lot of money, but, like, you knew he was going to be your second highest paid player for the next 5 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think all of that is true. And, you know, I think people need to kind of take a step back and look at how the market has looked.
Yeah,
for guys who are worse than Paul George.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how much, like, you know, guys like Tobias Harris, Al Horford are making. Paul George is only making a little bit more than them.
Yeah.
And he should make a little bit more than them. Like, if we're...
Better basketball player, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And, you know, I think he's kind of turned into this, like, heel in the NBA, you know, someone that people really love to dislike. And I think a lot of that is for some fun, good reasons, just because of how much they talked before doing anything.
The funny thing is, like, the funny thing though is, like, as Pat Bev becomes like this evil heel figure, Paul George, with like the talk of him like getting clowned on by his teammates or having his post-game speech met with eye rolls, like, almost becomes a Charlie Brown type figure, where it's like, oh, come on, man, like, we don't need to be mean to Paul. He's going through it already.
Yeah.
But that about does it for episode 3, part 3 of episode 3 of the Tom and Dave Show. I want to thank everybody for watching.
We have one more thing left.
What do we have?
Our tiers.
We have tiers. Okay, I almost hit the go home. Thank God. Okay. So we're not telling each other our tiers before we do them, correct?
We are not.
All right. Let's get into it.
All right.
We want to start with the out in the colds?
Yes.
All right.
I'm actually making one adjustment.
Okay.
Actually, no, I don't like that. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
You go with your out in the Colts first.
I'll say Thunder, Spurs, Kings, T Wolves. I don't think any of them have anything this year.
Tom, I just realized we haven't talked about the Spurs.
We didn't say a word about them, did we? So now we come to the San Antonio Spurs, a team that, if we are being completely honest, we forgot to discuss, but we're doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, what's good about the Spurs right now?
I mean, I think this whole thing, this whole situation, is a pretty good representation of this team. I mean, we literally went through all 14 teams. We're wrapping up the show, and then realized, oh, we forgot.
Yeah.
So, I did the research into the Spurs. I really realized this is a team that is pretty much mediocrity personified. Last year, they were ninth in offense, which I actually thought was pretty surprising,
Yeah.
but 25th in defense,
E.
and nice and average at 14th in pace.
Okay.
So we have this weird team that is a pretty decent offensive team just because, I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan are still both good players.
Yeah. They're still really good.
DeMar DeRozan had his most efficient year ever. He shot
Yeah.
53% of the field and had his most assists ever. He completely took the three out of his shot selection. Shot half a three a game this year. Just like
Which is
after
fine because he's not a great 3-point shooter.
no, and after all those
That's
years
not his
in
game.
Toronto, where everyone was like, "Oh, for Toronto to succeed, DeMar DeRozan needs to shoot the three." He was, hoisting up 4 or 5 a game in his last seasons in Toronto. And then
Yeah.
he comes to San Antonio, and Pop is like, "Nope, we're getting rid of that."
Yeah. We're taking it out.
And I think that was a good decision because, like I said, his most efficient year ever. Like, I
Yeah.
can't understate that enough. He shot 53% from the field as a guard
Christ.
who
That's insane.
mostly shoots mid-range shots
Yeah.
and gets the line a lot. Like, that's pretty
That
much what he
feels
did.
that feels like a good, I don't know, a good case study for why we might not always be right to just be like, oh, this guy needs to add a three to his game. Oh, this some guys that's just not their game.
Yeah.
Some guys it's like, no, I like taking an 18-footer. Like
Yeah.
that's where I feel most comfortable. And
Yeah. And I think that's even as far as like the efficiency stuff goes, I think it really is just like the difference. And I think DeRozan's done a good job adapting this. It's the difference between taking like a 17-footer and like a 21-footer,
Yeah.
Because I think the 21-footer gets into that long two range of like, why don't you just take one step back?
Why don't you just move? Yeah.
Whereas the 17-footer actually, those kinds of closer mid-range shots, I think, still have some value.
Yeah, I would say so.
So other guys in this team, you got Derek White, he's an okay shooter, very good defender.
Coming off an injury, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Coming off an injury. You got Lonnie Walker, who he needs more time, I think, to draw any real conclusions. He hasn't looked great.
One of the funniest draft night pictures ever.
Oh yes. He looks pretty lost on offense out there.
Yeah.
But still young. You got DeJounte Murray, who is a just exceptional defender and a very good playmaker.
Yeah.
This is a very nice comparison, but I still think it's somewhat apt. I called him a very light Ben Simmons type. Maybe a better comparison, actually, now that I think about it, is more like Ricky Rubio.
Okay.
But I think he has more of the athleticism of a Simmons than he does of Rubio.
That makes sense, yeah.
But he's not a great offensive player outside of his playmaking. He needs to get to the line more, be more aggressive.
Absolutely.
LaMarcus last year, actually he was good. He's still so good. Last year he shot 49, 39, and 83.
That's good.
18.7 boards, 2 assists.
Good numbers.
Gets washed completely if he's out on the perimeter on a pick and roll.
There's the rub.
I mean, he's very slow now. And he used to be a very good rim defender, rim protector.
Not as much anymore.
Not great according to the numbers, but still average, I'd say.
Okay.
As
you
we
can
get
work with that.
Yeah. As we get to their lineups, I want you to try to guess what their most used lineup last year was because it's a weird one.
Okay. I'm gonna say Murray, DeRozan, Aldridge are there.
Yes.
Okay. Murray, DeRozan, Rudy Gay.
No.
No Rudy Gay?
No, not there.
Okay. Lonnie.
Nope.
Was it a weird no, they can't be playing 3 guards there. Was Patty Mills in their most used lineup? Poeltl?
No Poeltl. So
oh God.
I'll go. It's you're right. It was Murray, DeRozan, Aldridge, and then Bryn Forbes and Trey Lyles. Now Trey Lyles was the surprising one to me.
Yeah.
He was in their most used lineup. I didn't watch the Spurs much last year, so that's my fault for not knowing that he played that much. But I imagine it seems like Pop likes him. I imagine he'll play a bit more this year.
Yeah.
Their best lineup last year was interesting. I mean, it was their bench lineup.
Really?
It was Derek White, Lonnie Walker, Poeltl, Patty Mills, and Rudy Gay. Sorry, I did not do that in any
unit.
Positional order there. I'm just going to read them off randomly.
Derek White was playing the 5.
But that bench was genuinely killing other teams' bench last year.
Yeah.
Because Rudy Gay can still score. Mills is a great shooter. Derek White is a nice playmaker, great defender, and a decent shooter. Lonnie Walker is like your effort guy, and Poeltl is like a decent big body.
Yeah, he turned into something after being the butt of jokes about being traded for Kawhi Leonard for a couple years.
Yeah. So in terms of their actual crunch time, this is what I got. I got Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, DeRozan at the 4, and LaMarcus Aldridge.
Let's do it. Big body DeMar DeRozan.
He actually played a little bit at the 4 last year, so this isn't crazy. And I say you put Keldon Johnson in for defense and Gay in for offense, depending on what you need, and maybe Patty Mills for some extra shooting.
Patty Trills.
Ultimate conclusion on this team, I don't think they're going to be awful. I think they have enough good, adult NBA players to scrape together enough wins to not be embarrassing.
They know how to win regular season games.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about, I think that thing I said earlier about, the Thunder having guys who just know how to live as an NBA player and, show up for work every night, the Spurs have that, at every spot in their lineup. Just guys who know how to play in terms of, actually just getting into the court and being in the right state of mind to play an NBA basketball game whenever they have to.
Definitely. And I think they're...
What's the floor on this team?
I had their floor as 11th or 12th. Just because the talent's not really there. I mean,
no.
You're relying a lot on some young guys too. You're relying a lot on Derek White, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker. A lot of kind of, I don't want to say unproven because some of them have played well, but question marks. And you have this young core of guys who, this is where it gets more into what is this team? You have this young core of guys who, I mean, at the moment, I don't really see how any of them have an all-star ceiling.
Yeah. It's tough to get there in the West.
And you have those guys with these genuinely 3 dinosaurs in terms of their play style between DeRozan, Rudy Gay, and LaMarcus Aldridge. You couldn't find guys that are more out of place in today's NBA, but this Spurs lineup tries
Spurs
to make
found
it
all
work.
three of them and brought them together.
Yeah.
It's a very
Um,
hopeful kind of twist there.
so I think maybe there's a value in playing so much differently from other teams.
Yeah, like maybe you're just kind of weird and no one can figure you out because you don't adhere to the same rules.
Yeah.
It's
So that's
possible.
probably so their ceiling lies in that, I think, is that these weird lineups, these weird combination of players, works because it's different enough.
All
But
right.
I
So
can't
like
say I'm that excited about them.
they'll probably be bad, but they don't have nothing.
If they were the eighth seed, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, like if they're in there in the first round against the Lakers. Um, okay, is it tier time?
It is tier time.
Have you got your tiers? Because I got mine.
Yes.
We got a preview of mine before we realized that we forgot to cover the Spurs.
All right. You want to go first?
Yeah, so my out in the cold teams are OKC, Sacramento, the Timberwolves, and then the Spurs. The Spurs are the team I was most concerned with putting in that tier just because I feel like they might actually have something.
Mm. So I have almost this. Wait, can you say yours again?
OKC, Sacramento, Minnesota, and the Spurs.
Okay. Oh, we have almost the same. I have just OKC, Sacramento, and Timberwolves.
You think the Spurs are going to be a play-in team contender?
Yeah, but just like, they might be 10th or 11th.
I don't hate that. Like you're basically betting on the house there.
Yeah.
Who are your playing teams?
All right, I've got Spurs. This isn't in order. This is just listing them. Spurs, Grizzlies, Warriors, Pelicans, Rockets.
Spurs, Grizzlies, Warriors, Pelicans, Rockets.
Should I only have 4?
No, I just wanted to make sure because I have 6. So I'm glad you also have more than 4.
Okay.
The mine are the Rockets. The Rockets are a playing team for me right now because I think they'll probably wind up like 7, but could also, if they trade Harden, depending on what they get back, move towards like a 9 or 10. Memphis, just because I didn't think they were bad enough to put them at having nothing.
Yeah.
Phoenix, because I kind of like a couple teams above them more, so I feel like them rising above 7 might be a little unlikely. Golden State, for the same reasons as Phoenix, just they are going to have to be better than last year, but a lot of teams just have to stay the same. New Orleans, because I think they have enough talent to get into like 9 or 10 at least, and then Portland, because when I started putting it together, them finishing 7 kind of seemed like it seemed more like they thought previously, just because again that middle of the Western Conference playoff picture is going to be very tight.
Yeah, no, I think all of those are fair picks. I mean, we have some slight differences, but I think those make sense.
And then for definite playoff teams, I had, this is in ascending order, so like the last team is the one I think is the best of the 3. I had Dallas, Utah, Denver.
Okay, so I have 5 here.
Okay.
Which, when I think about it, is a lot. But I had Blazers. This is no order.
Okay.
Blazers, Dallas, Denver, Utah, Phoenix. I talked about why I was high on Phoenix earlier. I do think they have done enough to get into this next category.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we have the same. We both have the LA teams
as the finals contenders.
Yeah, but I did want to put the Lakers as like the 1A there.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask you if we could do just like a tier that's the Lakers.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I think that's I was close to moving the Clippers down, but I thought that would be unfair to them. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like at risk of being unfair to the Clippers, it feels more like the Lakers and everybody else than last year when it felt like the LA teams and everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good kind of way to close out the show. It's just it feels like some teams gained on the Clippers and the Lakers kind of put some distance between themselves and everybody else. And it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a very competitive conference, and the season starts in like a week and a half. Like it's not far away. It's just under 2 weeks. That's going to be exciting. We're going to be back next week with a preview of all of it. We're going to do some award predictions. We're going to do our most intriguing players. We're going to do the all buff streams team. Very excited about that one. So everybody stay tuned. You just got about 3.5 hours of content out of us. So this should be more than enough to tide y'all over until the next episode.
Yeah. You got anything else?
Nah, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Follow us on Twitter.
Yes, you have Twitter.
Tom and Dave.
At Tom and Dave 2.
Yeah, at Tom and Dave 2.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thanks for doing this, Tom. I hope you have a good week.
You too, man.
See you, everyone.